Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football, continuing with our 2022 season previews as we take a look at the Oklahoma Sooners. This is a team that I found myself rooting against for years, and now heading into 2022, they might be my second favorite team in the country. I absolutely love the Brent Venables hire. I love the direction that Oklahoma is going in. Still, I feel like there's no doubt that Brent Venables is the man for the job to lead Oklahoma into the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, you just know that team had to get more physical. They needed to tackle better because every time they bumped into the big dogs in the SEC, with the exception of the Baker Mayfield year, they looked way out of place. So I think you're
And
right.
Brent,
You need a guy who wants to be there, wants to coach like an Oklahoma football team, not a Pac-12 team or a team that wants to play the way Lincoln Riley wanted to play.
yeah, I just have a hard time seeing that Sooners team under Lincoln Riley, as good as they were, succeeding in the SEC. Before we get into talking about the depth chart, looking at the team a little bit, just wanted to say thank you guys for all the support you guys from the channel. If you guys do like Oklahoma football, we will be for sure talking a lot of Sooners football this year, as they are one of our favorite teams heading into the season. And if you guys do like the content, consider subscribing. We appreciate it. Still, let's start talking some Sooners football. And it starts with the transfer quarterback, Dillon Gabriel, who I know you are a big fan of.
I think I'm a big fan of him in Jeff Lebby's offense. Like, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Dillon Gabriel's meant for every offense, frankly. But with the Jeff Lebby system that gets the ball out a little quicker, make good decisions quickly, and get the ball out accurately, not a ton of throwing the ball down the field, but like mix it in. I think Dillon Gabriel's kind of perfect for that.
Dillon Gabriel can absolutely rip it. And you're right. Those intermediate, shorter throws, that is where he thrives. He can push the ball downfield, but he doesn't have like a howitzer arm like a Will Levis at Kentucky does. And I do think it really fits him well. And he's a mobile guy. Jeff Lebby likes to get his quarterbacks out of the pocket as well. And so throwing on the run, you saw Dillon Gabriel do it a couple times in the spring game. I do think the tools for Jeff Lebby's offense, I really do think fits really well. And I mean, you look at his stats from last year at UCS, 68% completion percentage. That's what you look for in a Jeff Lebby offense. You're completing a lot of balls, you're efficient, and you're marching down the field. And Dill, he's going to have some really good wide receivers to throw to. Marvin Mims headlining the group. Why don't you talk a little bit about that wide receiving group? Because I think that's a really, really deep and really, really good group.
Yeah, I mean, to keep really three of your four major producers, I mean, Mario Williams, yeah, he's gone and he was good, so that's a loss. But to keep Mims, NFL talent, Theo Weiss, NFL talent, and Drake Stoops, who's just a guy who gets better and better and better and has started to really work his way into being a very productive wideout for Oklahoma. I think they really didn't lose as much as you probably would have thought.
And I think there's a couple of guys that I'm really excited for to see kind of on that 2 date. Jaleel Farouk is a guy that I know Sooner fans are really excited for. You saw a little bit of him in the spring game. Jaden Gibson, the true freshman. And then an X factor, and we'll talk about him in the run game. Eric Gray out of the backfield is somebody that I wanted to see play more football last year. With Kennedy Brooks there, they really weren't able to get him the ball as much as I wish they could have. But with Jeff Lebby and just a really smart offensive-minded guy, and you have an X factor in Eric Gray who can catch the ball out of the backfield, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a decent amount of Eric Gray in the passing game too. And then talking about the run game, Eric Gray is a guy that maybe not necessarily running between the tackles that much, although I think he can. There's a couple of freshmen that you're really, really excited about. Javante Barnes being the guy who really impressed during the spring preview. How do you
I
think
mean,
that
he
running
looked
back group?
awesome. That's what a really difficult guy to deal with, kind of like TJ Warren was at Oklahoma State, just a really physical runner, which, yeah, sometimes teams struggle against that, especially in the Big 12. So I also think Eric Gray is a guy you kind of been waiting for. Like when you saw him at Tennessee at a couple like big breakout years, I thought, and I just kind of waiting for him to produce and take it to the next level. And yeah, he's been sitting behind some running backs at Oklahoma. And I'm hoping like now that he's the guy in the backfield, he can have an because he at one time was like talked about as being potentially a Heisman when he was at Tennessee. Like he was really good there. So I'm just hoping he takes that step when now that he is the main guy and kind of shows what he was at what you thought he could be when you saw him lighten it up at Tennessee.
Yeah, and then looking over at the defensive side of the ball, it's not. I think it's really, really hard to argue that the personnel on defense is better than it was last year when you think about the talents they had in Nick Bonito, a guy that we loved in the 2022 NFL draft. Perion Winfrey was another dog. Isaiah Thomas, I believe, led the team in sacks last year. Brian Osmo at the linebacker spot. They were a very good team on paper. That being said, Alex Grinch, I don't think he got the best out of those guys. Nick Bonito was doing a lot of like playing out in the flat or spying quarterbacks, which he was good at. But when you have the guy who's arguably the best pure pass rusher in the country and not really sending him on 3rd and 12 consistently, I feel, and then Perion Winfrey also wasn't necessarily used in his probably best spot he could have. Could say probably the same thing for Isaiah Thomas. Brent Venables, he's going to come in, and although the defense on paper might not be as talented as it was last year, it's hard to not see this defense flying around the field and playing some good football here.
Yeah, I mean, that coaching staff, I think everybody who watched Oklahoma last year knows they failed that team. And they failed them on offense. They failed them on defense. Especially. It just wasn't good enough in either spot. I mean, shuffling quarterbacks, not having Benito rush the passer every down. Like things that were out there were like, what are we doing here? Like, because you thought that could have been a national title team, like loaded on offense, a defense that would uncharacteristically be good in Oklahoma, or like. So I don't know. I think you're kind of excited to get a Venables in who you know is going to coach the defense right. I mean, that's at least
the biggest thing I want to see is get those backers downhill a little bit. As much as I loved Brian Osmo, he was definitely more of a sideline to sideline guy who didn't necessarily get in the backfield as much as you would like. And I think it starts up front with some guys that I absolutely love through the transfer portal. Jeffrey Johnson started 4 years at Tulane. You get the kid from Hawaii, Jonah Lalulu. Those guys are absolute dogs on the inside. Isaiah Coe could add some depth. And then you have some guys that you're excited about on the edge. I thought Marcus Stripling looked really good in the spring game. And you got a guy like Clayton Smith, who is a top 40 player in his recruiting class. He's a young guy that I think could step up. But again, I think it deals more with the coaching that you're going to get. You look at some of the defensive linemen Brent Venables produced at Clemson. And if you can get some of that guy, that type of talent produced at Oklahoma, it's hard to see this defensive line, who has the talent and the athletes to make it happen, be bad this year.
Yeah, and I think Marcus Stripling, he has to be a dominant pass rusher for this Oklahoma team. And I think, you see the bones as he gets more athletic. I think you see the size, the strength, all that. But sometimes last year it didn't look like he had the burst to do it. And then in the spring game, he looked really good. So you're hoping if he can make that jump into being that dominant edge rusher, that'll really help this Oklahoma team. Because you're right, they loaded the defensive tackle position up with transfers and even had some guys coming back. You mentioned Isaiah Coe, and I think Jalen Redmond played okay football last year too. So you have some depth. But they're going to need one of those DNs to step it up and be the kind of the alpha dog. I think it'll be Marcus Stripling, but who knows? Reggie Grimes played okay last year too.
There's a bunch of guys who could make it happen. Ethan Downs was another guy who was a highly ranked recruit. At the linebacker spot, I mean, it starts with Deshaun White. He's a stud. You kind of have some question marks about the other positions, but Deshaun White's a good enough linebacker to kind of take control of that second level on the defense. Kind of like Brian Asamoah, flies around the field, makes a lot of tackles. I think it's going to rely on how good can that defensive line play, keep those linebackers free, and then just get your linebackers downhill. It's something that Clemson's defense did really good under Brent Venables, is getting tackles for loss, getting behind the line of scrimmage, and being aggressive downhill. I would like to see those OU linebackers get a little bit more downhill here.
Yeah, I think that's always the key for playing. Like, you want to see the aggressive defense that you haven't really seen a ton from in Oklahoma or really much in the Big 12 period. So I think Venables is going to have guys flying. I think Danny Stutzman, coming in as a true freshman, played a little bit last year. Obviously, was behind White and the guy in the pros now, Asamoah. But a guy who has showed some moments, and that you think if he can be developed in the right way, might also be able to step in and be a guy there for a few years who can really lead this defense and be a player.
And then the secondary, was a group that was not good last year, concerningly bad in consideration. If you look around the Big 12, there weren't many quarterbacks that were gonna hurt you. I mean, Spencer Sanders and whoever they were trotting out, whether it was Hudson Card or Casey Thompson and Gary Bohannon / Blake Shapen. Like the quarterback play in the Big 12 was uncharacteristically bad, and Oklahoma was 110th in passing yards per game given up.
And it's crazy because, like, you think there's some talent there. I mean, Woody Washington in the year
Good.
before, not last year, had a really good year, I thought. DJ Graham's played well. Billy Bowman looks like a guy who's got some talent. So you have, like, guys who I don't know why it was, like, yeah, so bad as you kind of mentioned, because you feel like there's some guys to play there. They just
And then
didn't play
Trey
well enough.
Morrison comes over from UNC with 41 starts under his belt. Like he's a really, really experienced guy. I like the idea of if you get a little bit more of an aggressive front seven, the secondary can play a little bit more aggressive and hopefully create some more turnovers and just make something happen on the back end that Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch's teams didn't really do much. Now, looking over at Dill, we need to go back and look at that offensive line. I forgot to bring them up. I think this is one of the better units in the country. Dill, we've looked at Anton Harrison for a draft lens. He's a stud. He's coming into his third year. He's played over 1,000 snaps. Really, really strong upper body. Wants to play lower. They get that transfer, McCade Metador from Cal. And then on the other side, Wanya Morris, a guy who we're just kind of waiting to break out a little bit.
Exactly. Like a guy who feels like he's been in the conversation of draft pick for the last few years, and he just hasn't played a consistent great season. So either kicking him back over to the right, letting Anton Harrison take over at left, which I think makes sense because he feels like the better player. And yeah, I think it should be a good unit there, really.
Looking at the schedule, I really like the schedule. Vegas likes this team. Their win total is 9.5. So, I mean, 10-2 record would be phenomenal under Brent Venables. And although Oklahoma, the standard is Big 12 title, like that is what you go into every single season looking for. I think more importantly, you just want to see a really good team that is improved and aggressive on defense. But this team can really do some damage. And I feel like it's a team that, because there's a lot of turnover, people like me and other talking heads of the media don't think this team will be very good. Utah, Kent State, and then you go on the road at Nebraska. We were at a Michigan-Nebraska game last year at Memorial Stadium. It's a hard place to play, but if OU is as good as we think they are, they should win that game.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma is going to be really good. I think you've seen now with the transfer portal, it's certainly easier to build teams, and I do think you're getting an. I don't think that team was properly used last year. I think you might be getting a better coach. I don't know. I think you're just excited. I think getting the offensive coordinator in Lebby is huge because there's like for him to leave Ole Miss, which I think was a really pretty good job, to come in and be the guy to take over like a head coaching level coach to run your offense, I think was huge. So I don't expect them to not be able to turn it around and be really good. I also don't think they lost as many transfers as people kind of think. They just lost a few marquee names.
Yeah, and then Kansas State on the road at TCU. You got the Red River rivalry, which will be a toss-up game. Texas, as inconsistent as they are, very good on paper this year than Kansas. And then you go into your bye week on the road at Iowa State. I think the big thing is you're getting Baylor at home and you're getting Oklahoma at home. It is hard to play football at Norman for those teams. The home field advantage is very strong. And having your two biggest, maybe next to Texas, biggest Big 12 matchups in the Baylor Bears and the Oklahoma State Cowboys at home is really good. And then you're on the road at Texas Tech. Again, if this team goes 10-2, makes a New Year's Six game, there's not many teams on this schedule that I'm picking Oklahoma to lose against. Will they drop maybe one against Texas, Baylor, Oklahoma State? Maybe. But they might be favorites in all 12 of their games.
They definitely, yeah. I mean, they've been the class of the Big 12 for 5 years. So, and I don't necessarily see why that should change just because they have Venables. I don't think he's a
Venables we trust, baby.
I think he's better coached than Lincoln. So.
All right, that'll do it for our Oklahoma 2022 season preview. Before we get out of here, we do have a presenting sponsor. We are lucky enough because of all the support you guys have shown us. Support for Rock Boys Football is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Their products are precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped's Performance Package, the ultimate men's hygiene bundle. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code ROCKBOYS at manscaped.com. If my math is correct, that is about 8 million balls. Guys, this is the right tool for the job. It used to be an absolute war zone down there for me. Now I'm using the right tools. Way better. Again, that is 20% off at manscaped.com with code ROCKBOYS for free shipping and 20% off. That is ROCKBOYS for 20% off and free shipping. Guys, check it out. Absolute game changer, and we'll talk to y'all later.